Thank you for being here today. This event, I'm proud to be a part of, hosted by the Communication Leadership Program here at the University of Washington in Seattle. For anyone new to the program, maybe checking in with us for the first time, we'd like to call it Comm Lead. This is a graduate program with global reach, educating students from all over the world about today's media landscape and all of the changes that are taking place in this dynamic field, from storytelling, content strategy, user experience, all the way to social media. My name is Derek Bell. I'm a 2011 graduate of the Comm Lead program. I've been telling people for years that joining up with Comm Lead was the best thing that ever happened in my career by a long shot. It gave me skills I needed to take the next step in my journey. I met some awesome people along the way, and it's always been a place for me to come back to. The past couple of years, I've been involved with the program on the alumni side, as an alumni fellow. It's been great to get back involved at this level, and I really encourage any of our graduates out there tuning in today or watching later on to take a look and to consider being a part of the Alumni Fellows program. It's worth every second. A great way to give back to this community and stay connected with the program. So our amazing alumni are, of course, the reason why we're all here today. I'm really excited to be joined by 4 of our Comm Lead graduates who have all published books in the last year or so. Humongous accomplishments, so congratulations all the way around. So we'll say hello today to Erica Schistler, Odika Tollefson, Anna Wisniewski, and Adrian Harvey. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And again, congratulations on all you've achieved with this big accomplishment here. I know that publishing a book, as we've spoke about leading up to the event today, no small feat. Something I've actually wanted to do ever since high school. I still have some ideas in my head, but I'll be really honest, I don't know how it works, and I've never really got the momentum to get it started. So that's kind of where we ended up today with this idea that those of you who have gone this path and finished the project probably have a lot of really interesting insights and experiences to share with the rest of our community. So today we're going to give each of you a chance to tell your story, introduce your books, and share some of those thoughts and experiences about the publishing process that hopefully sparks a few others like us out there in the Comm Lead community to follow in the footsteps. So we'll get started today with Erica Schistler. And we'll bring Erica on stage here. Erica's book, Los Angeles Potteries, A Collector's Journey Through Artistry, Craft, and Heritage. Erica, thank you for being here. First question, kind of get the event started. When we talked, I got the feeling that this book is almost like a love letter to Los Angeles Potteries, a really iconic small business in the LA pottery scene that was open in the 1940s to the early 2000s. You've got some amazing photography in here, some wonderful stories, and just wanted to ask a question about how you got started with such a unique idea, because I don't think it's fair to call this just a coffee shop book. There's too much heart in it for that. So tell us about the idea for this book and where it came from.
Well, thank you so much for having me. So that cover that you're looking at there, that's my grandmother's cookie jar. And I loved this cookie jar as a kid. Like, as all kids love cookie jars in general, but this cookie jar just looked so cool, and it was so inviting, and like every time you walked by it in the kitchen, you were like kind of looking at it. And so I thought it was really neat, but you know, we all move on with our lives and grow up and things like that. And then one day I was living in Olympia, Washington. I was going to Evergreen for undergrad, and I wandered into a store that I loved called Drees. I couldn't afford anything in it. I was a poor student. But I wandered in there one day, and they had a whole shelf of these cookie jars. And I was like, I don't understand how this is happening. And I found the owner of the store, and she told me about the cookie jar, and she told me about the owners of this company. And she just went on and on about what amazing people they were, and how the big thing that caught me, this was all hand painted, that they were employing hundreds of painters to sit and hand paint these ceramics that they made. And I thought this was amazing. But again, I couldn't afford it. And I thought it was cool. And I kind of, put it in the back of my mind. And I started looking at garage sales. I was like, well, I can't afford that new. But I started to find things at garage sales and started collecting, and just kind of kept thinking about it. But I was taking filmmaking and I was thinking, maybe I'll make a documentary about this someday. But, life moves on. And I just kept collecting, is what happened. I just kept collecting until one day I thought, I have to do something with this collection. The documentary didn't really feel quite right. And maybe that still will come someday. But I ultimately settled on making a book.
And this isn't a chapter book like some of the other folks on
Right.
the call will talk about. There's a lot more in there than just words.
Yeah.
So kind of talk about the process that you went through, kind of putting everything together.
Yeah, so the majority of the book is photographs of the collection, where I attempted to try and find like every piece of LA pottery that I could possibly find. But the written part of the book was me trying, I was originally just trying to create, a chronology of like who was this company and what did they do, things like that. Um, but what ended up happening was I ended up telling four stories. One is my story, like how I came to this and why I thought this was interesting. But in the course of doing my research, I found the daughter of the original owner. She was well into her late 80s. And she was willing to talk to me. She had an iPhone. She didn't know how to do Zoom or anything, but we were able to just talk on the phone and I recorded my interview with her. And she was amazing. The walnut that you see on the top of that cookie jar, she spent a summer painting those walnuts. So that was really fun to hear about, sort of her life going to the factory and painting those things. Then I found the son of the second owner. There was companies go through different evolutions, and there was a new owner. Um, he's a renowned ceramicist and had also worked at the factory for a time. And he was able to tell a much bigger, broader story of the company over the years. And then I found the last owner, who owned it until just a few years ago. And so what I did was I did interviews with all of them. Some of them were, more than 2 hours. I transcribed everything and kind of looked for the pieces that I thought might be the most interesting. And then I worked with an editor who took them and turned them more into a narrative where I had a list of questions. She was able, and I worked with her on those questions in advance because she wanted me to try and get them to talk about, what it looked like and what it smelled like and felt like, to try and bring out those kinds of things. She turned it into a narrative, and then I would review it, make the changes that I thought were needed, and then we would review it again with the person who had been interviewed to make sure that we had really chronicled their stories. And so that's how the text part of the book came about. And through that, I really was able to piece together what generally happened from the 1940s through the 2000s, and how this whole company evolved, and many of the people that are still working there today.
I love that back and forth collaboration. You told me before that you considered designing and laying out the book yourself, but settled on profession. And how did
Yeah.
that partnership work throughout the process?
So, if you look at a lot of the print on demand companies, they offer lots of templates, and some of these are very beautiful templates. And the truth was, I didn't have, because I'd never made a book before, and I'd certainly never made a coffee table book before. I didn't really have a sense of how big this would be. And the more I did, the more it kept expanding. And those templates don't necessarily hold up when you start going over 100 pages, 200 pages. So I started trying to think about what I would do. I work at Adobe. I thought about using InDesign and trying to do it myself, but the truth is I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not a book designer. And I was super lucky that I grew up with someone who's now a professional book designer. He went to Cornish. He lives in New York City now, and he focuses primarily on coffee table art books for museums. And so I was able to contact him and ask about, what it would take to have him design it. And so we just started working together, mainly virtually, but we were able to meet about 4 times where we could review things together. he would send me PDFs. I would make suggestions, and through the PDFs, I would also rearrange things for how I thought it should work. And we were able to first create a structure of the different sections we thought the book should be and what might be in those sections. I had already done all the principal photography. I'd worked with a photographer, and I'd taken a lot of the photographs myself. So we were then able, just in folders, to kind of structure the book that way so that it made it easy for him to design. And another thing that I did was I had fonts made. The bottom of all these ceramics have the stamp of Los Angeles Potteries, and it was under their own unique stamp, but I had it turned into a font that he was then able to use throughout the book. And that's what you're seeing on the cover there, was that typeface that I had made. So it worked out really well. It's expensive, I'm not going to lie. That was a lot more costly than had I done it myself, but I think it was really worth it. I felt like I'd put so much into it that I wanted it to have this beautiful design, and that was the way to go.
And for publishing, you looked at kind of an all-in-one company, a book baby, but decided different route. What can you kind of tell everybody today about those types of publishing companies and ultimately what swayed your decision?
I really wanted to go with print on demand. There are so many great reasons to go with print on demand. And the biggest one is that you don't have to have the upfront money. So I looked at every print on demand company you can possibly imagine. And the first thing myself and the designer were looking for was a specific trim size. We were looking for, I'm showing you the book, but it's a square book. And so, it's a little bit unique. The print on demand companies, as you can imagine, they have to have, templates and specific sizes. And so not many of them offered anything very arty, I would say. So trim sizes was an issue. But then the other thing is that this is a full color book. It's over 300 pages and it's all color. And the print on demand companies can do it, but it becomes really costly. So 100 pages might not be bad, maybe even 200, but when I went over, it just became cost prohibitive. All the advantages wouldn't be there for the people who are going to buy the book, who would have to pay a lot of money. There were some other things, though, that I discovered in the course of doing it. And again, this is specifically to like a coffee table or an art book, but it's things like it might not seem like that big of a deal, but end papers on these kinds of books are usually really beautiful. They might be a beautiful pattern or a beautiful color. On print on demand, you're not able to do that. They don't offer any end paper colors. They also don't have as high quality paper, which again doesn't matter so much for a textbook, but for something like this, you really want great quality paper and ink. So ultimately, I went with a company in China. I did have to put up the money myself to have those printed. The fascinating thing was that it came in costing much less than print on demand. But what it did mean is that I had to have the money up front, and that also I would have to be doing shipping myself. And a lot of the print on demand companies offer you tons of marketing and get you into all the online stores, and all of that would have to be done by myself again, or I would have to find a distributor to do it. So there's pluses and minuses. For me, it was more important that I had a beautiful book and I was willing to take on these other things.
Awesome. Well, success. I think you achieved it. It is gorgeous, gorgeous
Thanks.
with lots of fantastic artwork. So again, congratulations on such a great accomplishment. You should be proud, and we're proud of you.
Thanks.
And we'll bring you back, Erica, at the end of
Okay.
our call today for some Q&A with the audience. So everyone out there in attendance, if you do have questions for our authors, feel free to post those in the Zoom chat, and we'll take a look and have a Q&A at the end of the event. So we'll switch on over to Rodica Tollefson, and we'll highlight her book, The Freelancer's Compass: Navigate Your Way from Corporate Cog to Solopreneur Star. I love the term corporate cog. This book is a step-by-step guide to launching and leveling up freelance business on your own. Rodika has worked as a freelancer for much of her career, currently supports many B2B companies in the technology and cybersecurity space. So lots of expertise in this area to share, not just with us and people in her network, but with the rest of the world through this book. So Rodika, congrats to you as well. I think yours is a great example of writing about what you know. If you could tell us a few thoughts on how your freelance career can shape the ideas that eventually formed this book.
Sure. Thanks, Derek, and thanks everyone for being here, first of all. So yeah, right what you know, right? I have been running my own business, my own freelance business for 25 years. And I've basically grown it from a part-time side gig to a six-figure company and started working with some really big clients, big dream clients, global industry leaders. And as a solopreneur, as anyone who freelances know, it's kind of like a roller coaster, right? It's up and down. There's always challenges, and there's always mistakes that you're making and things like that. So that is what I essentially that was the foundation for my book, is thinking about all those experiences from when, especially when starting out, and all the challenges that you face and mistakes that I made and I probably could have avoided if I had done things differently earlier in my freelance career, adopting the right mindset, making sure I had all the systems to help my business succeed. And so I wanted to share some of those mistakes and lessons learned for people who are either starting out or having a challenge, maybe up leveling and growing their business, because inadvertently, those are some of the common threads, that things that people are experiencing.
And then putting your story together, I remember you talking about a methodology that you use where you said you created buckets that helped you kind of piece together um, the flow of the book and the story you wanted to tell. So can you give us an idea of that writing style and approach putting the puzzle pieces together?
Sure. It was a pretty simple framework, I guess. First of all, I have read and researched a lot of books on freelancing topic, and there is a lot of really good book out there. A lot of them I noticed focus on what I call the front end of running a business, which is kind of like getting clients, doing marketing, growing your business. And those are, of course, great topics you need to do and know all those things. But also you need to have a very well organized back end, as I call it, which is operations, because that really is a part that can make or break your business, and really plays a good part in your success. So once I realized, and also it's an area where a lot of freelancers really don't focus on early enough or adequately. So once I realized that this is the part I want to cover, operations, then I just start to think about what are the main areas of operations that I have to deal with basically daily in my business. And then that helped me come up with four main buckets. So first of all was infrastructure, which is like all your basic nitty-gritty stuff, like your tax structure, your licensing, business accounts, your contracts, all those little things that you need to get in the beginning. Then I went on to processes, this is really everything from how you manage your client projects, how you manage your client expectations, how do you set up your workflows, what are your typical timelines, what are your payment terms, your standard operating procedures, and on and on. And it's kind of a stuff that's really like nobody really loves doing that stuff. At least I don't love doing that stuff, but you really need to focus on, because if you don't, that's where a lot of times you run into challenges. And then a third bucket was tools and support systems. And that is not just your technology that you use, like the different apps that make you more efficient, help you run your business, but also your support team, which is not necessarily employees, but it could be people you outsource to, like your virtual assistants or your bookkeepers or your webmasters, because you usually freelancers tend to wear all the hats in their business, but eventually if you want to grow, you're going to have to give up some of those functions and focus on your core strengths. And then part of your support systems is also people around you, like your mentors or your coaches or even your peer support network. And those are relationships that are very, very valuable to making sure you're successful. And then the last bucket was road mapping, which technically not part of operations, but I felt like you really need to have some sort of vision or goals that would drive where you're going.
I love it. And you told me also that you didn't, of course, use AI to write the book, but you did use AI in a pretty interesting way. Can you tell us a little bit about the tools that you use and kind of what you were seeking to gain out of that technology in this process?
Sure. Yeah, I actually have a little label in the front of my book that says 100% human produced, because I know it's kind of a big trend now for people to write entire books with AI. But I use AI in the reverse, sorry, reverse way of how most people would use it. So I did use it to create an outline. I fed it some data, information about my market, what I want to cover. It gave me a pretty thorough outline. And then I looked to see what that outline did not cover, because as we know, AI pretty much regurgitates content, right? It does not have any new ideas. And so I looked for what's missing and what isn't covered, knowing that that outline came from the pool of other content out there that's about freelancing. And that helped me come up with some areas where I could have my book stand out. And it's like, if those of you who work in marketing, if you think of like a content strategist who does a content audit to figure out where your gaps are, right? And looks at your um, looks at competitors and things like that, and then it provides you the opportunities. That's kind of what AI was to me, essentially.
Love using it in the reverse order. Kind of like find the gaps and then target those for content. Fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
And a good lesson for all of us to take away about how just yet another way to leverage some of these tools. You also talked about an online course called Tiny Books that kind of teaches folks how all of this works, from writing story outlines to developing marketing plans. What are some of the key things that you learned about that you could share with prospective authors out there?
Sure. So I self-published my book. I knew I wanted to go that route, even though I created an imprint to be kind of look more professional. But when you self-publish, really, I think the biggest challenge, or at least for me, was accountability, because there wasn't, like a publisher or an agent sort of making sure I meet deadlines. And so keep writing while running my business full time was really a big challenge. And that was the main driver for looking for a program in the first place. And I looked at several. Tiny Books, what I really appreciated um, with that program is that we got a very comprehensive, a thorough manual, like an entire ebook that guided us through the process of writing, editing, and especially self-publishing. And that was very very useful, because I didn't have to do all that research on myself and figure out that aspect. But also, the program was only 2 or 3 months. So their idea is that you're going to basically write a book in that amount of time and send it out into the world, which turns out not realistic for most people. So it took me a lot longer to do that. But I received, quite a bit of support during those 2 or 3 months, and that really, really was helpful.
Then one more quick question here. You mentioned in our call that peer reviews and proofreaders were a really big part of your editing process,
Sure.
which I think is important to talk about. What was your process for this, and what was the kind of feedback that you were seeking from those folks?
Sure. So I wanted to have some better readers to look at my draft, and I engaged them sort of like halfway through the process. I just tapped my network and I asked them for feedback like, did the writing flow well? Did the ideas resonate with you? If you are a freelancer or a business owner, are those things that you'd be interested in knowing? Did the tone seem off for the audience? Things like that. And I received very helpful suggestions that led to quite a few improvements. And one of them that was the biggest change is a person gave me feedback to showcase more examples of other people and other success stories. And consequently, I interviewed, I think, 6 or maybe 7 other successful freelancers, and I added their profiles to the story. And that really added quite a bit of depth. And then in terms of editors and proofreaders, I mean, I'm a professional writer, I'm a professional editor and proofreader. I know that you could read something many times and still miss mistakes, and that it is not advisable to to edit your own writing. So I actually hired a copy editor after my full manuscript was done. Then I hired a proofreader who looked at the manuscript after I had implemented all the copy editing changes. And then I hired a second proofreader at the very end after the layout was done to basically look at the complete digital version of the book before it goes to press. And I can't tell you how many mistakes they found. it really saved me quite a bit of potential embarrassment, and it just made the book really much more professional.
Awesome. Yeah, and I feel like we're picking up themes already from a couple of our authors today that it takes civility, that it's a collaborative effort with lots of eyes on content. So again, to you as well, congratulations, well done, and we'll welcome you
Thank
back
you.
in a few moments for Q&A at the end.
Thank you.
All right, switching gears to our third author we'll feature today is Anna Wisniewski and her R-rated title, Epic. It's saying the quiet parts out loud. I did check in with Anna before today's call.
On how I say it in front of polite audiences. Yeah.
When you present about this, and she insulted me, not usually. So I think for an intro to this one, I really don't think there's a better way to say it than what Anna herself wrote for the book back cover. So I'll read this off real quick because I think it's fantastic. Gone are the days of fluffy, feel-good advice that leaves you nodding off and wondering how to get your time back. Whether it's learning how to work for an octopus manager or discovering the power of being underestimated, this book throws traditional leadership wisdom overboard like a soggy biscuit at a pirate tea party. So, first question, Anna, we're all dying to know, what is an octopus manager?
So an octopus manager is a manager that has to have their tentacles in everything. And there can be good octopus managers and bad octopus managers. A good octopus manager is just keeping a pulse on everything that's going on, and the bad ones are the micromanagers. And that chapter is one of the things I got sick of reading again and again in leadership books. And even Gartner did one of like, here's the type of leaders. There's the cheerleader, there's the teacher. But none of them are willing to talk about like how to deal with difficult managers. And so I came up with the 5 archetypes. The narwhal, they're really pretty to look at, but what do? The seagull, they fly at 50,000 feet and they poop on everything. The orca, who is very pod oriented, but occasionally chews off the rudder of their own sailboat. The octopus, and then the blue falcon, because I wanted to talk more about like, how do you survive a manager that's got a completely different style than you or is just driving you absolutely nuts? So an octopus manager has their tentacles and everything.
Got it. Been there, done that, right?
Yep.
Everybody nods their heads a little bit. You clearly worked with execs and leaders in various industries throughout your career, and obviously that isn't always easy. So how did those experiences lead you to this particular book? You talked about management style, but give us a little bit of a hint of what else is in there and kind of how your background helped shape that.
Yeah, so I was in the US Coast Guard for 12 years. And when you're an officer in the Coast Guard, they send you through leadership and management training at least twice a year for different types of leadership. But when I joined the corporate world, while my leadership and experience dealing with literally natural disasters and all sorts of crises did help me in the corporate world, what I came to realize were a lot of the leadership lessons I learned working with the admirals and the senators and all that when I was in the Coast Guard were not the ones they intended to teach me. And so, it all kind of it started like I realized it basically when I was at Amazon Web Services, and in 2017 we crashed the internet, and people were kind of panicking on like, and I'm not joking, we crashed 50 of the top 100 web pages. And so I realized that applying the leadership lessons and the lessons I learned in the Coast Guard to the civilian world and to the private sector with the executives at AWS actually worked really well in ways that people wouldn't expect. So that's kind of what got me, thinking about, like when you and I were at AWS together, I rebuilt the launch operations program using port operations methodology from the Coast Guard. Like how we bring big ships into port is how AWS now launches all of their products. So it was just kind of that combination of things.
Love it. That's some inside baseball.
Yep.
Technology right there. So you had the idea, but you said that to get things done, you just need to write. And you actually met up with someone at a coffee shop and said that you would get together and write separately to help focus on the task at hand, which I think is a wonderful tip. Like, what else can you share about the writing process and just getting pen on paper?
So the biggest thing I would say, I highly recommend Chuck Wendig's book on writing. He has a gentle guide for writers that's really good. And one of the things he talks about that I took really to heart was you have to find what works for you.
So I am very neurodivergent. Anyone, and I'm sure Anita's chuckling because there's no surprise there from having worked with me or had me as a student. But I need that extra body doubling. I need someone with me to kind of keep me on task, or I'm over on social media, or I'm playing with my dogs. So body doubling is the technique where I'd meet with someone at a coffee house, or we'd even jump on Zoom together and spend an hour not talking to each other, but writing. And that worked really well because then I felt accountable to someone else. But other things I've done that really work for me, because by the way, I just picked up an agent for my nautical horror novel, which is looking like it might come out next year, fingers crossed. But with the nautical horror novel, because I did it differently than I did this one, I found other things along with the body doubling. Like every morning I have my cup of coffee and I have my free write sitting next to me. And instead of scrolling through TikTok or whatever else, I spend my morning coffee time, and my goal is, hey, just get a paragraph out. If I get a paragraph out, I consider the day a success. But it's amazing how many times I sat down to write a paragraph and wrote a whole chapter. So, don't set unreasonable goals. Like someone was talking, like we had another author already mention that the 3-month finish the manuscript thing is not doable for everybody. But for me, it was with F It Watch This. I did actually write the entire manuscript from May of 22 to September of 22. I wrote it very quickly. So it's about finding what works for you, and don't beat yourself up. There's going to be a day you don't write. Don't beat yourself up. It happens. But you have to find the place that's easy. Some people like rituals. One of my friends, she's got a few books out, Kiri Callaghan. She always she wears a special, like she makes her tea, a very special tea she only drinks when she's writing, and she puts on her robe and she grabs her cat and she puts the cat on the desk, and then she begins to write. And that helps cue her brain that it's time to write. You got to find what works for you.
Love that. Taking notes and repeat. You mentioned a free write. What can you tell us about that particular tool, and then maybe any other tools or apps or things like that that you to help you along the way?
I actually brought my baby. This is the expensive free write that my husband got me a while ago. This is a free write. They have travel versions and markedly less expensive versions than this heavy aluminum one, but you can see it kind of looks like a typewriter. And you can see Mr. Hemingway's face there. But when I power it up, come on. All that's on the screen, it's kind of hard to see with the lighting, is what I'm writing. I can't see who's posted on Blue Sky. Like on my computer right now, I have probably 40 windows open at any given time. And what a free write allows me to do is just write. You cannot scroll back up and see what you wrote at the top. You can't, you just literally go. And that has been incredible for me because I'm of the personality type where I will go back. Like I also here, let me get this. For my novel, I got all sorts of stuff here. I have standard old style index notes and a whiteboard. And the reason is, as I'm free writing, for example, I decided in the middle of, and I did this in F It too, I decided I wanted to change something earlier in the book. Well, because I'm doing it on the free write, I can't go back. So I write a post-it to myself, hey, chapter 3, remember to bring this up. And then when I go, I take everything from free write and I put it into Scrivener. Scrivener is my favorite writing tool. It's literally an author's tool. And so that's how I kind of keep it going. But the free write meant that I couldn't go back and start editing. Like I changed one of the characters' name 3/4 of the way through the book. I decided Chad was too obvious for a bad guy. And so I changed the name and had to go back. And the same thing happened in F It was like, oh, I want to mention this in an earlier chapter, took a note and went back to that chapter. So it allows me to just get the words out, because the hardest part of writing a book is getting that first manuscript done. And the best thing I can tell anybody about the first manuscript of any book, it's going to suck. First drafts are trash. They are your baby and you love them. And then you're going to read back through them and be like, what the heck was I doing? And you're going to find things you don't like. That is how it works. These books we see on our bookshelves that have come out and that have, like even little books like this, like the first draft is always garbage. And then you have to go back through and rework it on your own first. And then you're going to start bringing in additional help. But please, please remember, the hardest part is finishing it. So finish it. Then you go back and you reshape it. But if you don't finish it, you can't go anywhere. So.
Sound advice. One more question real quick here, so that I think this is interesting for everybody to hear about. You spoke to me earlier about an author incubator that you participated in. Now what was that real quick? And then what were the takeaways that you?
So there's a number of these companies around that do author incubators. I used Manuscripts Press. And the reason I did that was similar to Radhika and talking about freelance book is I am very ADHD, and I also run my own. I was in the process, I was getting laid off from Oracle, best thing ever. And so I had a cushion where I literally paid like this author incubator to have a developmental editor that kept me on time and that helped me. Like that was, I could always reach out to them and say, hey, I'm stuck. What do I do here? It also, the cost also included like my copy editor, the formatting editor, all the formatting, getting it into PDF form, helping me upload it to all the different sites. They took care, like it is printed under their name. But a lot of it for me was I hadn't published a book before and I needed that kick to help me get over the scariness of it. I would say it is very expensive. The one I did was a little under $10,000, but again, I had the income due to the layoff and my own company. I run a crisis management company, and I also teach here at I teach crisis comms for our grad school. But it was a great thing for me. I don't think it's for everybody, but if you are someone who needs that driving force and that little bit of extra help to like get over certain things, or you don't want to have to go on to like Readsy. Readsy is an incredible resource, by the way. If you don't want to go into Readsy and like have to find your own copy editor and your own, whatever, an incubator can be a good idea. And there's a couple that are a lot less expensive, but you also have to look at what the cost for all the different types of editors and the formatting and all that. When you look at it, by the end of the time I was done, about $10,000 was about what it cost for all the support I got. So it's a good way to go if you need that extra help.
I love it. No, thank you for the insights and lots of great tips there on holding ourselves accountable and just getting it done, right? Like you said, getting the first one out and finished is the hard part. Going back and fixing it, fun part. Okay, thanks, Anna. We'll talk to you soon. We're going to switch over to Adrian Harvey, our fourth author spotlight today, and Adrian's book called Down the Rabbit Hole: Slowing the Spread of Misinformation and Propaganda on Social Media. Obviously, super timely. But Adrian, thanks for being here and welcome. You wrote this book with a co-author, Lacey Fott, who is the CEO of Spry Social Media Consultancy, where you also work. This is like a reference guide and a workbook. You told me about the internet's history and the present, and of course, some of its pitfalls and risks. The title suggests Down the Rabbit Hole explores how people can protect themselves and learn about misinformation online. So you told me when we spoke about this that it's kind of a book about social media written by social media managers. Tell us a bit about your background and how that shaped this idea.
Yeah, so I have a very diverse background within digital marketing. I am a social media manager, a strategist, but I've also worked in app development, web design, UX design, content strategy. I've done all the things. And so I have this kind of holistic view of like how social media works, why features are changing, why like the reasons why the platforms are doing what they're doing. And that's how I come to it. And I kind of realized, I mean, I'm also a teacher. So I also teach at South Puget Sound Community College as an adjunct professor for intro to social media. And so like I am in this unique position where I do the thing, I teach the thing, and I also experience people who don't have as much experience in it as I do, and I'm teaching them. So it's this kind of like I'm constantly learning new things. I'm constantly learning about other people's relationships to social media, both from my students and from the like dozens of different accounts I manage. So through my, I manage, I have aviation that has been a client. I've worked in the academia. I've worked in just all sorts of different types of social media worlds. And so I see social media as this refraction of a bunch of people talking in different niches and this and that. And so I realized with my students that not everybody knows or sees it that way, and how easy it is for many people to become radicalized, polarized, just have terrible mental health, etc. And the real reason why I kind of really wanted to get into it was during 2020, I was managing social media for several Washington state counties, and we were doing all the mask updates, the public service announcements about public health, and just to manage and witness all of the destructive confusion and arguments. And it was just like, man, I wish that there was something I could do in some way. And so that was happening. And my boss, Lacey, we both had been talking about doing something. And we were like, what if we wrote a book that could be used for college courses, but also is like a workbook so that maybe parent and like other high schooler could work on it together and just learn about social media together. And so that's how we got here.
Love that. Another good example of writing about what you know. Your book follows the metaphor of Alice in Wonderland, where every chapter takes you through different themes and themes from that legendary story. How did you weave the narrative that you wanted to tell about social media into a fantasy setting like that?
So the reason why we did that is because Wonderland there's so many parallels. Like Alice, the person entering Wonderland is all of us. Wonderland is this topsy-turvy place, which also is the internet. In Wonderland, there are beings and creatures that appear to be some way, and then you realize that they aren't really that way. There are a lot of instructions, a lot of just world creating that Alice is assuming based off of her experience of the world that things are the way they are. And so she's directed to do things that then turn out to not be in her best self-interest. So there were just really so many parallels and metaphors that just fit so perfectly into a social media. And I mean, it is a classic tale. And so it just made it really easy to kind of use those metaphors. We actually have each chapter is like chapter 1 is Wonderland, where we explain a little bit about the internet. We go into the history of the internet, why the internet's here, the fact that it's a science experiment with a bunch of science people just making it up, and like it will never stop being evolved, So we kind of like had some context building, but then also we have, Alice, we have the the Cheshire Cat and the Mad Hatters. And so each chapter of the book is a different part of Wonderland where we can draw, connect those metaphors.
And you had a co-author with it. So we've talked to everybody so far about the writing style. Can you walk us through kind of how that partnership worked and how you were able to share the load, so to speak?
Yeah, well, it was kind of funny. We've done a couple author interviews, and people have asked us, how do you do this? Don't you guys get mad at each other or yell at each other or jealous of each other? It's so funny because we are totally yin and yang. Like we kept each other accountable. I don't know how all you all wrote a book by yourself. I do not think I could have done it by myself. We did have an editor too, but like, when my co-author Lacey was like, I hate this, I'm like, it's fun, let's do it. And then when I'm like, I hate this, she's like, that's fun. So, but we also have like different backgrounds. So I've worked in a ton of different jobs with a lot of different experiences. She's owned this agency her entire working life for 13 years. And so we have this like really interesting backgrounds. And she also, her degrees in broadcast journalism from WSU and I'm from UW. So it's kind of like we encourage each other. And we're both invested in the overall goal, which is educating and sharing the idea of everyone using social media for good. And so we're both 100% all into that. All the proceeds of the book go back into our company. And so it was just really easy. And it wasn't hard at all to just collaborate. But
Good.
logistically, what we did is we created an outline, and then we outlined the entire book together, and then I took one piece, she took another. We just kind of like traded on which pieces each of us were writing, and then we'd swap and then kind of update it, and that's kind of literally how we did it.
Nice. Yet again, story of partnership and collaboration, which clearly a theme here with all of these stories. Your book about social media, and you connected with an editor through social media, which I think is a good tip for everybody to hear about. So even if it's a simple story, kind of tell us how you got that done.
Yeah, we just went onto LinkedIn and said, hey, does anybody know of an editor? And we got a list of people. And then we found a woman named Yvonne, who is very similar to what Anna was talking about. She was an editor, she was an accountability partner, but then she and her husband also run basically they took care of the outline, they outlined it, they helped us get an imprint, and then they loaded it onto KDP for us. So that's the route we did, and it was about the same price as what Anna was talking about.
Thanks. And then last question here before we kick off our Q&A with our audience today, but you called out KDP, which stands for Kindle Direct Publishing. Obviously a popular way for authors to get their stories out there into the world. What was that process like, and why did you choose KDP? What were the benefits?
So we really we had Yvonne take care of everything. So I don't logistically know exactly how it all works. I know how to log in and tootle around, but you have to have the manuscript, edit it, get the formatting done, and then load her up. And that's about as far as I know how it goes. But we did KDP because we set a goal for ourselves in 2024 that we wanted this book done by the election. And so it basically was like we have to self-publish because we're not going to be able to find an editor or a publisher in that amount of time. So it was kind of like just it's the accessibility and the speed that we were looking for. And so we basically busted it out from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing the story about how you got the book out the door and shipped, especially such on a time crunch. Well done. And fantastic job by everybody on the call today. Just super exciting to see how much time.
Can I plug her book real quick? Because I had a chance, Adrienne and I are classmates, but I had a chance to tell her that I've added her book to the Crisis Comm syllabus for this coming fall. Because so much of what we do in Crisis Comms deals with fighting misinformation and things like that. And I really loved the way she wrote it. So it's actually been added to the syllabus for if you take my Crisis Comms class. So if anyone in here is going to take my class, you can get ahead of the game by reading it now.
Okay, thank you. Dang, yay!
I love it. Okay, with that, we'll kind of switch gears and do a Q&A to wrap up today's call. I'm going to bring in Anita Burnett-Cross, who works with Comm Lead program. She's had a leadership position in the program for a long time. Currently, our artist in residence, and Anita and I have known each other since my time in Comm Lead all those years ago. So it's great to see you as always. Welcome aboard. And any questions you have from our audience for our authors, take it away.
Thanks so much, Derek. I was experiencing this wonderful hour and thinking, you have a new career ahead of you. You are an excellent interviewer. And having worked on you in the lead up to this, you also have just brought such preparation and care to this conversation. So I want to give a huge shout out to you, Derek. Thank you for the vision for this, for working with the fellows, and really just engaging in these thoughtful conversations. So truly, you can leave corporate behind and just move into a world of interviewing people around their books. Terrific, terrific work. I commend you. And I really want to thank all of the authors for being here. It's so exciting to see each of you having brought these books into the world. And I wanted to mention for some of the alums on the call here, it's been interesting for me to listen and also imagine how the Comm Lead curriculum has evolved, because we now, for one of the degrees, have a writing requirement. And so all four of you have brought books into the world. And I think that we're a degree program that also recognizes just the value and importance of the written word and what it takes to transform ideas in one's mind and bring them to the page. So thanks for all the work that you've done and for being here. And I'm going to treat this as a bit of a speed round because I know we're coming up towards 1 o'clock. So I've got two questions, one gleaned from the chat that I'm going to amend a little bit, and then a final one. So think of it as a chance to give some final pearls of wisdom as we move to the top of the hour. And my first question builds off of Joel's in terms of marketing. All four of you have written very different books, all driven by a particular interest and passion of yours. And so when it comes to marketing, I'm going to ask you all, have there been particular examples you could each give of a unique approach to marketing that you've taken, given the nature potentially of the book, the kind of community you're hoping it will reach? I'd love to hear what might have been something you've done to market your book in a way that's unique to either the topic of the book or the kind of author that you are, or the community you're trying to reach. And maybe we'll start with Anna, then go to Erica, then Radhika, and then Adrienne.
Okay, point number one, if you're going to put a cuss word in your title, Amazon will not allow you to boost it. Just like I intentionally chose a very inflammatory title. Anyone who has worked with me knows I am very bluntly spoken. The title was done intentionally. My mom was very embarrassed, but be very careful when you're titling your book. You want something unique, but you want something that people can actually market off of. That has been the biggest blocker for me marketing my book, is because even with the asterisk in it, people are like, oh no, a curse word, which you think they'd be over since the whole subtle art of not giving an F has been around for how long now? But that's part of it. A lot of my marketing has been word of mouth. I'm in Chief, the Women's Executive Network. So I've done a lot of speaking gigs with them and things like that. I was just in Albany doing some work. I always carry a couple copies of my book with me, because if I can seed plant a couple copies in a place, more people tend to buy them. Also, it was really fun when a whole bunch of admirals got mad at my book and kind of went off on me publicly. I used that for marketing, because I was like, this is exactly what I was talking about, and the old school way you don't want to do things. So they helped me. Like, I think I sold over 1,000 books off of one high level admiral going off on me on LinkedIn. I saw a spike in sales. So it's been basically kind of opportunistic, hit or miss, like just kind of moving. I wanted to do a book tour, but it's just not feasible with my company. So I just kind of turn every chance I travel into a mini book tour. But I would also point out that I never expected or wanted, like, cared that this book was like I hit top 10 on Amazon in my first couple weeks, which was great, in business and also in business humor, which was kind of what I was targeting. But this was never a let's make all my money off of it book. This was a kind of a written out of spite book and get it out of my system. And but my goal is actually my fiction book, and then my Kickstarter for Oh No is a picture book for execs coming later this spring. So
well, good.
Those books,
look forward
those
to
books are,
hearing about those.
Yeah, I'm writing currently I'm writing we're finishing the artwork, and I'll put it up on LinkedIn so people can see it, for Oh No is a picture book for execs, which is literally a picture book on how to do crisis comms written in the style of a children's book. So
wonderful. Thanks, Anna. Yeah. Erica, how about to you? I mean, we saw in your response in the chat that you've got it in particular stores, but tell us a little bit, or give us one example of a unique approach to marketing you're taking.
I don't know how unique it was, but I started a fan page on Facebook long before the book. So
fantastic.
I just like put it up there, like, is anybody else interested in this? And I started gathering fans, and then I did Instagram and TikTok. And so the truth is, they became my biggest supporters. I kept updating them as I was going. Like when I did a photo shoot, I'd post a picture of the photo shoot. When I met with the book designer, I'd post a picture of that. And so they were, they're my first buyers. And that group just keeps growing and growing. And part of what was really cool about that too is that lots of people posted that their parents or grandparents used to work there, and then they had stories. So it became a community where they're all sharing with each other and they're sharing their collections with each other. So I feel like that was the biggest thing I did. And I'm still, because this is pretty new for me, I got it out just before the holidays so that I could do some get it out there for some holiday shopping. But now I'll make a bigger push for marketing. But that was the big thing that I did in advance, was just have a fan page. There's likely people that are interested in what you're interested in.
Absolutely. Build that community before the book is out. Love it. Radhika.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is a unique strategy, but I, like Anna, didn't get to write this book so I could make money, just the story that had to be told. So what I did is I distribute through Spark, but I also did the ebook through specifically Amazon because I wanted it to get on Kindle Unlimited. And so as soon as I launched the book, for the first week, I did a promo for basically a free download of the ebook. And then I went to everyone I knew and told them, hey, if you want this book, if it's useful for you, go grab a copy, because I just wanted it to get into people's hands. I am part of a lot of communities of other freelancers, marketing communities. So I basically, lots of Slack groups, Facebook channels. So I just went through all those channels and let everybody I knew know about it. And actually that helped me also, like, for a whole of 6 hours on Amazon, I was #1 on new releases in a couple of categories. And I took a screenshot because that goes away so fast, but it's just like,
Love
hey,
it.
bestseller. So that worked really well, just to spread the word about it and consequently get some hard copy sales as well.
Wonderful. Thanks, Radhika. And Adrienne.
There's 3 things. We are doing ads on Amazon. We're also social media managers. So we kind of as part of our job, we're marketing it, and we have social channels for it, and we try to get people to talk about it. But also, Meta is interesting in that the words misinformation, disinformation, propaganda are just scary words. So it's a little bit of a tricky talking about it, marketing it, and just creating a community around it, because it is so sensitive. And so we do Facebook social media ads, we do Amazon ads. We've been doing a few podcasts. You can get onto lists of podcasters that are looking for people to interview about certain topics. And so we've done that a little bit. And then also what I've been doing, because I've been trying to promote my own personal brand, which I just roll my eyes back in the back of my head when I talk about that. I do it really well for other people, but for myself, it's hard to put yourself out there. But in the spirit of doing that, I've been trying to blog more, write more, and I also have created a relationship with my local newspaper. I live in Yakima County now, and so I've been doing columns in the local newspaper talking about just social media, general social media, educating the folks who still buy newspapers about social media. And so I'm just grassroots trying to get the word out.
Wonderful. Extending that platform. Thank you all for so much. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, so I'm going to invite Derek back in here. But while he's coming back in and getting spotlit, I'm also going to ask Millie to drop the alumni newsletter for Comm Lead into the chat. This is the most current one for winter quarter. If you are not yet signed up, this is a new venture. We started in the fall. Events like this will be promoted through the newsletter, along with featuring alums like those wonderful 4 illustrious alums on this call. But Derek, let's bring you back in for some last thoughts. And for the wonderful panel, if you're so inclined, there was a terrific question that we don't have time for about making it through the tough parts. So if you want to drop your last pearl of wisdom in the chat before peeling off, please do, because there's no question that motivation is important. And I know you've been putting in some great ideas. So Derek, close us out.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, everyone. It's been awesome to get to know you and see you again, and hear your stories. I learned a lot. I told you at the beginning that I've had ideas in my head since I was a teenager about getting a book done. It's like a huge bucket list item for me. So I was genuinely curious to learn how the process works and what people experienced and how to actually get it done, take it from idea to finished product. So I commend you. I know how much time and love you put into these projects. So we're all rooting for these books. We're excited to see what you all do next. And I think that today's conversation is just a really great example of what Comm Lead can bring to the table, right? We learn these skills, we kind of think critically about what we're seeing out there, and then we put those thoughts and ideas into action. So that's my plug for the program overall. As I said at the beginning, I've been working with the program these last few years as an alumni fellow. So any alums out there, please contact me if you're interested in learning more on what that looks like and why this has been such a great experience for me. So thank you again to everybody for being here today, and we wish you all the best. And for all those prospective authors out there, keep us in the loop, because I could see this being a recurring chat that we have with our alumni authors going forward. So thank you again, everybody, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
everybody.
you.